Master, I salute you. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Houghton Woods. How is this? He replies by saying, and this is that well-known will to live. Breaking off the sentence in the middle, he tells of its hindering character in the word hindrance. This will to live is called a hindrance because it hinders, that is, pains living creatures with unkindly actions and the like. He finishes what he has begun to say by the words sweeping on by its own nature. It has a disposition to sweep on by virtue of its own nature in the form of subconscious impressions. That is to say, disposition is not accidental, even in the case of a worm just born that is full of pain and low in intelligence. This disposition is not accidental. He tells the reason for this in the words, as a result of perception. This fear of death being inconceivable, that is, not acquired in the present pratyudita birth, as a result of perception, our inference, our verbal communication, it must be inferred that the pangs of death have experienced in the previous birth. This is the point at issue, for even a child just born trembles at its sight of a murderous thing, and from this particular quivering, the child infers the nearness of pratyasakta to himself, of the experience of death, and is found to be afraid of it. Thus, we see that fear results from pain, or from whatever leads to pain. Moreover, in this birth, he has not experienced or inferred or heard of death. So we gather that he has known only in a previous birth the pains of death, or that which leads to the pain, and from this a memory of himself as he was in that condition persists. This because this, go back, try to claim a previous life and a previous life and a previous life. This reaction is in the first life. So therefore, what do we have to say about that? And from this memory of himself as he was in that condition persists. This, moreover, does not occur unless there be subliminal impressions, instinct. Furthermore, this subliminal impression cannot occur without experience, and experience does not belong to this life. Therefore, the only remaining alternative is a subliminal impression from a pre-existent birth. Thus, there was a connexion with the previous birth. The word so, tatha, requires a correlative, just as. Thus, by supplying the word just as from the sense of the sentence, he shows that the words just as this, how the meaning of the sentence would be in the unspeakably stupid, means the most sluggish intelligences. He shows what the kind of learning is by saying some understanding of the prior and of the final limits of human lives. The limit is the end. Now the prior limit of man is the round of rebirths, and the latter is isolation. He by whom this has been understood from things heard or from inferences is called one who has the understanding of the prior and of the final limits. And this well-known fear exists and has become established in the case of the worm and the wise man. It may be objected that in the case of the unwise, fear of death is conceivable, but not in the case of the wise man, since in him it has been eradicated by knowledge. Or else, if the fear of death has not been eradicated, it would be externally present. With this in view, he says, why is this? The answer is, because it is alike. He does not refer to the wise man who is conscious concentration, but to him who discriminates among the basis of things heard and of inference. This is the point. Now, an important thing that we should consider is it's not death or poverty or anything like that we should be fearing. It's the ill choices associated with, right? Rich or poor, we should fear making the wrong decision, but not so much that we don't hope and enjoy our lives and whatnot. Well, I mean, not in a way that we can do this in a way that does not interfere with life, but enhances life. 10. These hindrances, when they have become subtle, are to be escaped by the inverse propagation. These 5 hindrances, when they have become like burned seeds, after the mind which has predominated over the seeds of the yogin is resolved into primary matter, come with it to rest. Thus the hindrances have been characterized, and those which should be escaped, 4 states, the dormant and the attenuated, and the intercepted, and the sustained, have been shown. But why is not the 5th state, which is subtle, mentioned by the author of the sutras, inasmuch as it is in the state of burned seed? To this he replies, 10. These subtle are to be escaped by the inverse propagation. Think of the inverse pentagram. It doesn't necessarily mean something evil. It could be, this type of set of steps, right? It is that, of course, which is written within the scope of the exertions of man, which has been described, but the subtle is not within the scope of man's exertions, that he might escape, hana, it. It may be, however, be escaped by the inverse propagation, that is, by a reduction of the mind stuff, which is an effect, and which is characterized by the feeling of personality, to the state of its own cause, the thinking substance. He explains the sutra by the word these. Easy. But of the permanent hindrances, consigned to the condition of seeds. 11. The fluctuations of these should be escaped by means of contemplation. Those fluctuations of the hindrances, which are, of course, after having been attenuated by the yoga of action, should be escaped by the elevated pramsamkhyana contemplation, until subtilized and made like burned seeds, and just as a spot of coarse matter upon pieces of cloth is first shaken off, and afterwards the spot of fine matter is removed with an effort and by some appropriate means. No coarse fluctuations are those whose opposition to hindrances is very slight, but the subtle fluctuations are those whose opposition is very great. Now when the hindrances have been attenuated by the yoga of action, by directing his exertions towards what does a man accomplish the rejection of these hindrances? In reply to these, he says, but of the permanent hindrances consigned to the condition of seeds, by those words he distinguished is there from those having been sterilized. Vandhyana. He recites the sutra. 11. The fluctuations of these should be escaped by means of contemplation. He discusses the sutra in the words of the hindrances. Now when attenuated by the yoga of action, these also may be eradicated themselves and their effects by reducing them to the condition of their own causes. This is the inverse propagation. Thus the coarse fluctuations have been explained. When a man's exertion is still within the scope of its elevation, the author states what the limit is in the words beginning until. He elaborates the expression subtilized by saying burned. On the same point, he gives us simile in the words and just as upon pieces of cloth, with an effort, such as by washing it, and by some means, such as an alkaline Gathara mixture. The likeness between the simile and the thing to which it is compared lies merely in the fact that there is a coarseness and a subtlety, but not in the fact that they are both removable by an effort. For this removal is impossible in the case of hindrances, which are to be escaped by the process of inverse propagation. Those whose opposition is very slight, which have been described, are such as slight causes of destruction. Those whose opposition is very great are such as have great causes of destruction. And next below, the inverse propagation as a means of attaining the destruction of the hindrances would be the elevation, prasamkhyana, in view of the inferiority of the elevation has been called very slight. 12. The latent deposit of karma has its root in the hindrances and may be felt in a birth seen or in a birth unseen. In this case, we have a latent deposit of the karma of merit and of demerit propagated from lust or from greed or from infatuation or from anger. And this may be felt either in a birth seen or may be felt in a birth not seen. Of these, that the latent deposit of karma, which isn't so far as there is keen intensity, proceeds from sacrificial formula and from self-castigation and from concentration, and which is perfected by a worship of the Ishvara, the self-mastered, self-aware, but, obviously in the sense of a god, are of a deity, are of a sage, are magnanimous beings. Yeah, don't worship other than the supreme God, really. It's all distraction. Magnanimous beings has intensity and its fruition as a latent deposit of the meritorious karma. Although we can say that false worship is better than no worship, you still don't go down that path. Thus, for instance, when so far as the hindrance is keen, a contempt is shown again and again to those who have sought protection in terror and in sickness and in wretchedness, or again to those magnanimous beings who castigate themselves. This contempt also has fruition as a latent impression of evil karma, just as the youth Nanditvara passed out of the human form, was transformed into a so-called divinity. Also was the case with Nahutsa, so-called prince of the gods, passed out from his proper mutation and was transformed into the condition of a brute. Among these latent deposits, there is, in the case of those who dwell in the underworlds, no latent deposit of karma, which might be felt in a birth seen in this life, and in the case of those hindrances which have dwindled, there is no latent deposit of karma, cause, effect, action, that which is done, which might be felt in a birth unseen. That is another life. See, if it's that which is done, instinct and other things inherent to life don't require another birth to be the case, but this may be true. Hindrances are hindrances because they hinder and because they are the causes of birth and of length of life and of kind of experience, and latent impressions of karma are of this kind, tattva, but undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, and other hindrances do not hinder and are not such cases. How then can undifferentiated consciousness and the rest be called hindrances? In reply to this, he says, 12. The latent deposit of karma has its root in the hindrances, and may be felt in a birth seen or in a birth unseen. That for whose production and causal activity is a hindrance in the root. That is the latent deposit of karma. What birth and length of life and kind of experience has its root in undifferentiated consciousness. So undifferentiated consciousness and the rest are also the causes of them. He explains the sutra with the words, in this case, that in which all selves in the round of rebirths are latent. Acharata is a latent deposit. Achaya, the latent deposits of karma are merit and demerit. Merit, which is the cause of heaven and similar states, occurs when as a result of some desire, there is an inclination for a work which is desirable. Similarly, there is a demerit in such cases as when from avarice another is robbed of the money. Likewise, there is nothing but demerit in such cases as when from infatuation the idea of merit directs itself to killing, or something of the kind which is demerit. But there is no merit which comes from infatuation. Merit does, however, come from anger, as from instance the case of Dhruva, from anger at the slight put upon him by his father, Uttanapada. For as a result of the meritorious latent deposits of karma, which were performed in the desire to surpass his father, he obtained a position above the dwellers in regions of the sky. A human can surpass a light being if it is righteous. Demerit, however, due to anger and resulting in the murder of Brahmana, is well enough known to everyone. He describes the double character of this latent deposit by saying, and this may be felt in a birth scene. He describes this, and may be felt in a birth scene by saying, in as far as there is keen intensity. In their respective order, he gives examples in the words, just as Naditshvara. The dwellers in the underworlds are those who make latent deposits of karma, as a result of which certain underworlds, such as the cooking pot, are reached. These have no latent deposits to be felt in a birth scene in this life, for no human body, nor any kind of mutation of it, can endure such torment, Vedana, and is to be endured by them and uninterruptedly for thousands of years. The rest is easy. 13. So long as the root exists, there will be fruition from it, and that is birth and length of life and kind of experience. While the hindrances exist, the latent deposit of karma starts the fruition, but not so the cut root of the hindrances, just as the grains of rice, when encased within the chaff, as seeds in an unburned condition, are fit for propagation, but neither the winnowed chaff nor seed in the burned condition is so fit. Similarly, the latent deposits of karma, when encased within hindrances, are propagative of fruition, but neither the winnowed hindrances nor seed in the condition of having been burned by the elevation, prasamkhyana, and propagative. And this fruition is of three kinds: birth and length of life, and kind of experience. In regard to these three, this is under discussion, whether one karma is the cause of one birth, or whether one karma gives the impulse to more than one birth. There is a second discussion as to whether a more than one karma projects more than one birth, or whether a more than one karma projects one birth. Now, it is not true that one karma is the cause of one birth. Why so? Because if the karma remaining over accumulated from time without beginning an innumerable, and the karma of the present should not have as the results an order limited in its time, discouragement would be inflicted upon everybody. And this is the prohibited. Neither to one is the karma, the cause of more than one birth. Why is this? Because if, while there were more than one karma, only one karma at the time would be the cause of more than one birth, a lack of time for fruition would be inflicted upon the remaining karmas. That too would be prohibited. Neither three is more than one karma the cause of more than one birth. Why is this? Since it is impossible that more than this one birth should occur simultaneously, it must be supposed that they occur successively. This likewise would involve the same difficulty as in the last case. The result is then the diverse accumulation of latent deposits of karma, whether of merit or demerit, made between births and the end of life, remains in a relation of subordinate parts, and a dominant part. This is made manifest at the ending of life, after growing compact by one single impulse. Akap huragat kan akapragatakena. After accomplishing death, it assumes a rigid form and causes a single birth only, and this birth receives its length from that same karma, and again, in that same length of life from the same karma, it attains to its kind of experience. The latent deposit of karma, since it is the source of the birth and the length of life, and the kind of experience is said to have a threefold fruition. And people can look at that sort of thing and say, oh, maybe reincarnation is why things are so bad, because people think that, you don't have to you don't have to overwhelmingly do good in this life. You can, make a process of it. And if the paying off of the bad builds up over the generations, you're likewise going to run into some serious issues. Consequently, this latent deposit of karma is said to have its limit in one existence. On the other hand, the latent deposit of karma, which is to be felt in this seen birth is said, since it is the cause of the kind of enjoyment only, to originate a single kind of fruition, and not a single existence, or when it is the source of the length of life, and the kind of enjoyment, it is said to originate two fruitions, as for instance in the case of Amditshvara or Nahusa. But this mind stuff, like a fishnet, made in different shapes on all sides, and having from time without beginning a form fixed, samrchita, by subconscious impressions, which are like knots, caused by the experience of the fruition of the karma from the hindrances, is spread abroad. Therefore, these subconscious impressions are said to be preceded by more than one existence. It is this particular latent deposit of karma, however, which is said to have its limit in one existence. Those subliminal impressions which produce memory are said to be subconscious impressions, vasana, and these are said to subsist from time without beginning. But that latent deposit of karma, which has its limit in a single existence, has both a fruition limited in time and a fruition which is without limit of time. Of these two orders, the limitation in time, niyama, insofar as it is its limit in one existence, belongs only to the fruition which is to be felt in a birth of this seen life, and which is limited in time, whereas the fruition which is not to be felt in this seen life, and which is without limit of time, does not have the limit in time which has its limit in a single existence. Why so? Because that fruition which is not to be felt in this seen life, and which is without limit of time, has three kinds of outcome. Gati, either it's annihilated, natcha, when this latter fruition is finished and become unfruitful, or two, it is cast away, avapa gamana, into the dominant karma, or three, it may continue for a long time, subjected to the dominant karma, which has a fruition limited in time. Of these, the annihilation of the karma which is finished and become unfruitful is like the annihilation in this present world of the dark karma, which once the bright karma has dawned, with regard to which this has been said, verily indeed, karmas should be known by twos and twos. A single mass made of merit destroys the dark, and the dark bright evil mass. Wish thou then to do well done deeds. Right here to thee the wise make karma known, casting away into the dominant karma, with reference to which it has been said, should there be a light admixture of guilt in the sacrifice, it is either to be removed or to be overlooked. Therefore, the admixture is not enough to remove the good fortune won by merit. Guilt can be said to be a noble virtue, shame not, but the point isn't guilt. It's to cause us to undo, to atone for the wrong we've done, prevent doing more, right? Therefore, this admixture is not enough to remove the good fortune won by merit. Why not? Because in my case, there is much other good fortune. Were this then admixture of guilt is cast away into the dominant karma, even in heaven, it will make only a slight reduction of merit. When he says it may continue for a long time subjected to the dominant karma, which has a fruition limited in time, how is this? The answer is because in the case of karma, the fruition of which is not to be felt in this seen life, and which is limited in time, death is said to be the appropriate cause of the manifestation. Not so, however, in the case of the karma, which is without limit of time. On the contrary, in this latter case, karma, the fruition of which is not to be felt in this seen life, and which is not limited in time, either is annihilated, or is cast away, or is quiescent, upasita, the subjugation to the dormant karma, for a long time into the appropriate manifesting conditions of the cause of the karma, bring it close to its fruition. But since this fruition of karma, the place of the time, or cause, is none of them determinable, therefore it is that the ways of karma are known as mysterious and not easily discernible. Moreover, since the general rule is not broken down, even if there be exceptions, Therefore, the latent deposit of karma having its limit in a single existence must be acknowledged. The objector says, let this be granted. Since the latent deposit of karma is based upon undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, there may result, after the production of knowledge, vidya, a destruction of undifferentiated consciousness, and so there might not be any subsequent latent deposit of karma. Still, the latent deposits of karma, done previously and accumulated by succession from time without beginning, are of innumerable births, being settled in their period of development. It would be impossible, by realizing the efforts to cause these latent deposits to dwindle insofar as they might be experienced. Because of this, it would be impossible to cut off the round of rebirths. To this, he replies with the Sutra 13, so long as the root exists, there will be fruition from it. Birth, length of life, kind of experience. What he means to say is this: the result of the latent deposit of karma is pleasure and pain, and in so far as both birth and length of life have the same purpose as latent deposit and are necessary consequences of it, these two are also propagated by the latent deposit. Moreover, pleasure and pain are attached to pleasure, to passion and aversion, and the latter are necessary conditions for pleasure and pain, since pleasure and pain are not possible in the absence of these, that is, passion and aversion. Furthermore, it is impossible to say that wherein a man is pleased or disgusted is not to him, as the case may be, either a pleasure or a pain. And I guess I'm going to have to stop there. Namaste. We salute each other.